Hello again, party people. So here's part two, the tracing portion of our spooky spiderweb project. I have this piece of scrap paper in front of me because I want to show you a thing or two. I want to show you a thing or two of the differences between crayons and oil pastels. So here's a crayon, a construction colored crayon. So it doesn't really matter. It's still crayon. And here is a oil pastel. I'm going to swap that out. Here's a better oil pastel. Navy blue. Navy blue and blue. Okay, so let's look at the difference. I'm going to zoom in a bunch. If I take this crayon and I color like I normally would color with it, it's kind of light. And with this watercolor paper, you can see that it doesn't get into all those little nooks and crannies. Remember, watercolor paper has like bumps and ridges on it. Okay, that's why erasing off a watercolor paper doesn't really work all the time because it's kind of hard to get out of all those grooves. Watercolor paper likes to absorb things. So if you have crayons for this part of it, it's perfectly fine and it should work just well for you. But you're going to have to go back and kind of fill in those little white parts. So I'm pushing a little bit harder. I'm not going crazy. I don't want to break my crayon. Okay, so that's like the two comparisons. Okay, now here's the same thing with the oil pastel. Okay, you could tell right away that the oil pastel, it kind of pushes down a little bit more. It's a lot softer. It's made out of a different material. Okay. If I have to go back over it again, we're really going to be making a thick, heavy line. The idea behind this is if we trace with a crayon or an oil pastel, we'll be able to paint different colors inside each little aspect of our picture. It's called an oil pastel resist, and it's something that we're going to be using a lot of over the next couple of years and throughout all of our watercolor painting projects. It'll help us keep everything nice and neat, and it will build a lot of confidence. But there's a huge but when it comes to the two of these different materials. One but is that crayons, they don't really move around. The big but comes with oil pastels. Oil pastels are messy. They move around a lot. Okay. My circle's now completely gone. And they could get on your fingers. Oil pastels are really good for shading and for drawing with when we want to do that. For this project, we don't want this to happen. We just want to have a solid line. So if you have oil pastels, you need to be very, very careful. Everybody, no matter what you're choosing to use, crayons or oil pastels for this portion, please go grab a mat to put underneath your project. Okay, I have a nice big black mat. You have whatever you have. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. Take this piece of paper. Here's our picture that we just worked on. I redrew it. I redrew it with pencil. Okay. Now with both of these materials, crayons or oil pastels, we are going to work in kind of the same direction. Sometimes I like to work from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. And if you have a younger brother or sister, yesterday, they worked on a similar project where they made a jack-o'-lantern, and as we trace from the top to the bottom. Okay, for this, we want to kind of trace from left to right because there's a lot going on throughout the entire project. Okay, or you could turn your paper, and then you'd be going from top to bottom. I'm going to be going from left to right. I'm right-handed, so I'll naturally be going this way. If you're left-handed, go from the right to the left. Okay, the idea is not to smudge anything. So, I'm going to push my sleeves up. You push your sleeves up. Let's get tracing. I'm going to use a brown for my branches. And I'm going to make sure that I'm kind of starting at the edge of the paper. And I'm going to go all the way through to the bottom. We don't want to have any holes or gaps on our oil pastel line or crayon line. That's going to allow the watercolor paint to go through. For our spider, I'm going to use a black. Now, this can be kind of tricky, especially when we have a bigger oil pastel compared to a small pencil line. So you have to be kind of careful as you trace. I have to think about what I'm going to do with those eyes that are in there. So I'm going to kind of leave that be for right now. I'm going to stick with my black oil pastel. Actually, you know what? We're going to get a little funky. I'm going to use purple. Haha. I'm going to use purple to trace our spider web. If you want to use purple, go for it. If you don't want to use purple, it's okay too. Black was my alternative. Navy blue would work well also. So I'm going to start on this side. Okay. Just following my pencil line around. I'm going to stop this line right here in the middle. Just remember, we're trying to stay as nice and neat as possible. Now in here, if we play our cards right, we will be able to kind of make this look like a mosaic or stained glass window. My plan is to have each little section of our spider web different shades of blues and purples next week. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Be careful when you're going to trace that moon, because right here, I almost did it. And you saw me. I stutter stepped here. I thought that that was part of our spider web, realized that that's a nice straight line. That's our moon. I didn't want to ruin or trace my moon with purple. I've never seen a purple moon. Let me know if you have. Cool. Okay, we're done with this. I have this really nice orange I'm going to use to trace my moon. Our moon, we can play that same kind of game. If we use different blues and purples for our spider web, we could use different oranges and yellows for our moon. Okay, now I'm back to the other side of the paper. Now, let's take a quick look. Let's zoom in very quickly. Ooh, that's so much better. There's some things that I want you to be aware of. Look, I made some mistakes. I knew that I couldn't get my oil pastel line on these number 7s for our spiders. And I did the best job that I can trying to draw around them, but I still didn't get them. Okay, just leave it. It's okay. Even on tracing some of these lines, I didn't exactly make it as perfect as I wanted to. Down here, even up here. Okay, I'm not too worried about that. Neither should you. This is our first project where we're tracing with oil pastels for the school year. Okay, and it's kind of like we're getting back into shape. We're remembering how to do things. If things aren't perfect, that's okay. If you want to go back and try and erase these lines, you may. Just be very careful, because as I showed you just now, those oil pastels love to get messy. And when we paint our background, there's a good chance that they will disappear. Okay, so I'm going to start again with that brown oil pastel to do this branch. I'm going to make this a little thicker down here because I didn't like how I drew that. Last things for tracing, I'm going to go through and trace our ghost. I'm going to use black just so it really pops out. Cool. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do before I say that I'm done for the day is I kind of have to go through here, and I'd like for you to do the same thing and kind of just go through and make sure that all of your oil pastel lines touch another line. Okay? We want to make sure that we don't have any holes or gaps, just so that our colors don't mix next week. Because if our colors mix, then there's almost no point in doing this entire thing. This purple part right here. I think I need to add a little bit more down here. Okay, the rest of this should be good. Cool. Okay, so this is done for today. Now, there's one last thing that I need to tell you before we call it quits for the day. Number one, oil pastels smudge. We know this. Normally, I would take your projects and I'd collect them carefully and I'd put them in our class folder nice and neatly so that they didn't move around and like rub together, okay? So for this project, since everybody's at home, I need you to put this on a shelf or tape it to your refrigerator. Sorry, tricky word for me. Put it somewhere where we know that the oil pastels aren't going to smudge. And that when we come back next week, we could have a successful painting day. Okay, so tell mom or dad or whoever's at home with you that you need to put this somewhere safe because we gotta make sure that the oil pastels don't smudge, and that we will be painting this next week. Next week, we're going to need a cup of water, a watercolor set, and a paintbrush. Okay, can't wait to see how these turn out. Please make sure you are either emailing me the pictures of your progress or you're trying to upload onto our Google Forms. I know it's been kind of tricky, but we've been having people handing them in that way. Everything's been looking great. Can't wait to see how these turn out. Have a wonderful Wednesday.